In the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council's Assessment Division, lead researcher Tom rubbed his tired eyes as he reviewed the latest batch of species evaluations. The massive holographic display before him showed countless data points from across the galaxy, each representing a different intelligent species. This was the 10,000th year of the Grand Survey, a milestone that demanded special attention. "Another batch of giants," he muttered, scrolling through images of 12-foot-tall beings from the outer rim. The Council had always favored physical prowess in their rankings. Bigger meant better, at least according to the ancient protocols. A gentle chime interrupted his thoughts. "Lead researcher, you have a message from Junior Analyst Mark," announced the computer. Tom sighed. Mark was new, barely 3 cycles into his career, and had an annoying habit of finding extraordinary discoveries in the most mundane data. Still, protocol demanded he review all findings. "Display the message," he commanded. The holographic screen shifted, revealing a data cluster Tom had overlooked. It centered on a small planet in an unremarkable spiral arm, third from its yellow star. Earth. "What's so special about?" Tom's voice trailed off as he began reading the analysis. His eyes widened with each passing line. The humans of Earth were tiny by galactic standards, averaging less than 6 feet in height. Their bones were relatively fragile, their muscles unimpressive compared to most spacefaring races. Yet the data showed something remarkable. These small beings had spread across their entire planet, adapting to every environment from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts. They had no natural armor, no claws, no remarkable physical advantages. But they had done something no other species had managed. They had used their minds to overcome every limitation. Tom leaned forward, fascination replacing his earlier tiredness. The readings were extraordinary. Human brain activity patterns showed levels of complexity that exceeded the Council's measurement scales. Their problem-solving abilities were off the charts, and their capacity for abstract thinking surpassed even the legendary minds of the Central Core. "Computer, verify this data," Tom ordered, still not quite believing what he was seeing. "Data verified. Multiple sources confirm all readings," the computer responded. Tom started compiling a report, his fingers flying over the holographic keyboard. This discovery would shake the foundations of how the Council evaluated species. A race of beings, barely larger than children by galactic standards, had achieved technological advancement rates that defied all known models. He paused in his typing, remembering something from the historical archives. "Computer, display the development timeline of Earth's technological progress." The display shifted again, showing a graph that made Tom gasp. In less than 300 years, humans had gone from horse-drawn carriages to space exploration. The line of advancement was nearly vertical compared to the gentle slopes of other species' progress. "They're still developing," he whispered, watching as new data points appeared in real time. "And they haven't even noticed our observation satellites." Just then, another alert flashed across his screen. His heart nearly stopped as he read it. One of their primitive space probes had just detected an observation post that used the Council's most advanced cloaking technology that had successfully hidden from species 10 times more advanced than humans for millennia. Tom sat back in his chair, a mixture of excitement and worry crossing his face. The Council needed to know about this immediately. These humans, these small, seemingly insignificant beings, they weren't just another species to be cataloged and ranked. They represented something entirely new. As he prepared his emergency report, Tom couldn't help but smile. After 10,000 years of evaluations based primarily on physical size and strength, a species smaller than most was about to change everything. The galaxy would never be the same. 2 weeks after Tom's initial discovery, the Council's observation room buzzed with activity. Researchers from across the galaxy had gathered to study the peculiar species from Earth. The massive screens displayed various human activities, from deep-sea exploration to mountain climbing, from Arctic research to desert survival. "Impossible," muttered lead observer Ray, shaking his head as he watched a human run what they called a marathon. Their endurance makes no logical sense. They're so small, yet they just keep going. The data continued to pour in, each new piece of information more surprising than the last. Humans could survive in temperatures that would freeze or burn most species. They could go days with minimal sleep, adapt to high altitudes, and recover from injuries that would kill creatures twice their size. "Look at this," called out Anna, another researcher, pointing to a new data stream. "They're colonizing their moon. Not just visiting, actually planning permanent bases there, and they're doing it with technology that's centuries behind the galactic standard." The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Most species waited until they had gravity manipulation and advanced life support systems before attempting lunar colonization. Humans were doing it with rockets and basic pressure suits. "That's not even the most interesting part," Ray said, pulling up another screen. "Watch this footage from their military training." The display showed humans running through obstacle courses, climbing walls, crawling under barbed wire. But what caught everyone's attention was their problem-solving methods. When faced with a barrier, they didn't just try to overcome it. They found ways around it, under it, or sometimes completely changed the rules of the challenge. "They're adapting in real time," Anna observed, "not just physically, but mentally. Each failure leads to a new approach. Each success gets improved upon." Just then, an alarm blared through the observation room. Red lights flashed as new data streamed across the main screen. The humans had done something unexpected again. "They've detected another observation post," Ray announced, his voice filled with disbelief. "But this time they didn't just notice it. They've sent it a message." The room erupted in chaos. No species at their technological level should have been able to do that. The observation posts used quantum-encrypted communications and multi-dimensional cloaking fields. The message appeared on screen, surprisingly simple. "We know you're watching. Let's talk." "How did they?" Anna started to ask, but Ray cut her off. "They reversed engineered parts of our technology just from detecting our energy signatures," he explained, his voice mixing awe with concern. "They didn't need to understand how it worked. They just figured out enough to make it work for them." The Council's emergency alert system activated, calling for an immediate session. This changed everything. The humans weren't just surviving or adapting. They were actively pushing beyond their limitations, using their perceived weaknesses as strengths. As the researchers hurried to prepare their reports, Ray stayed behind, watching the screens. He saw humans building cities in deserts, establishing research stations in Antarctica, diving to ocean depths that would crush most species. Their small size, rather than being a disadvantage, allowed them to create tools and solutions that larger species would never have considered. "We've been looking at this all wrong," he said to himself. "Their size isn't their weakness. It's their advantage. They had to become smart, had to become adaptable, had to become innovative, because they couldn't rely on physical strength alone." The screens continued to show scenes from Earth, each one a testament to human ingenuity and determination. The galaxy's smallest spacefaring species was about to make the biggest impact in Council history, and no one was ready for what would come next. The Council's emergency meeting chamber hadn't been this full in over a century. Representatives from every major spacefaring race packed the circular room, their attention focused on the central holographic display showing Earth. "We must make contact immediately," announced Head Counselor Dan, his voice carrying across the chamber. "The humans have already detected 3 more observation posts. They're getting closer to breaking our encryption." The gathered representatives muttered among themselves. It was unprecedented for a species to force first contact like this. Usually, the Council decided when a race was ready. "We've selected a team for initial contact," Dan continued, gesturing to a group of specialists. "They will." He was interrupted by a flashing red alert. The main display switched to a live feed from Earth's orbit. A small, primitive-looking spacecraft was approaching one of the observation posts. "They've launched a vessel," someone shouted from the crowd. but their technology isn't ready for deep space. The room watched in stunned silence as the human ship, held together by what looked like outdated welding techniques and basic propulsion systems, carefully maneuvered toward the observation post. The Council's sensors showed that the vessel's life support systems were barely adequate, its hull protection minimal by galactic standards. "Their pilot must be either very brave or very foolish," muttered Ray, who had been called to advise the Council. One small breach in that hull. Before he could finish, the human ship did something unexpected. Instead of attempting to dock or communicate, it released hundreds of small objects into space around the observation post. Analysis shows they're mirrors, Anna reported from her console. Simple reflective surfaces, positioned in a precise pattern. Understanding dawned on Ray's face. They're using our own cloaking field against us. The mirrors are revealing our exact position by reflecting the distorted space around the post. Head Counselor Dan stood up. "Drop the cloaking field. Power down all defensive systems. Prepare for contact." The moment the cloaking field disappeared, a transmission came through. The human ship was hailing them using a surprisingly elegant combination of basic radio waves and quantum signals they'd partially reverse-engineered. The message was simple. "Hello up there. Would you like to meet for coffee?" The council chamber erupted in confused discussions. The humans weren't showing fear, anger, or even surprise. They were treating this momentous occasion as casually as meeting a neighbor. Their response is unusual, Dan observed. Most species either react with fear or aggression when they discover they're being watched. "Look at their vital signs," Anna pointed out. The pilot is excited, curious, happy even. They're treating this like an adventure. The council quickly agreed to accept the invitation. Within hours, they had arranged a meeting on neutral ground, the dark side of Earth's moon. As the council's delegation prepared to depart, Ray made an interesting observation. "They chose the meeting place perfectly," he said. "Close enough to Earth to reach with their technology, but far enough to show they're willing to meet us halfway. They're already demonstrating diplomatic skills." The human ship maintained its position, waiting patiently as the council prepared its diplomatic vessel. Scans showed that despite their ship's primitive appearance, they had equipped it with several ingenious backup systems and safety measures. They had planned for this encounter carefully. "They're small but smart," Dan concluded, watching the final preparations. "They turned our own technology against us, forced contact on their terms, and now they're directing the first meeting, all while making it seem like a friendly invitation." As the council's ship departed for the meeting, one thing became clear to everyone. The humans had passed their first test with flying colors, and they hadn't even known they were being tested. The testing chamber of the Galactic Council's Assessment Center hadn't been designed for beings as small as humans. The three human representatives, Bill, Jack, and Mary, looked tiny standing next to the massive testing equipment. Yet their confident postures showed no sign of intimidation. "The standard species trials will begin now," announced Chief Examiner Pete through the translation system. "We'll start with the physical challenges, then move to—" "Excuse me," Bill interrupted politely, "but we've studied your testing equipment, and we have a suggestion." The examining panel exchanged confused looks. No species had ever interrupted the trials before, let alone offered suggestions about the testing process. "The equipment is designed for beings 3 times our size," Bill continued. "Instead of using it as is, we've figured out how to modify it for more accurate results." Mary stepped forward, pulling out a small device she had apparently built during their short waiting period. "This adapter will let us interface with your systems while accounting for our size difference." The examiners huddled together, discussing this unexpected development. The humans had not only identified the testing system's limitations, but had also created a solution in minutes. "Very well," Pete finally agreed. "Proceed with your modification." What followed amazed everyone watching. The humans didn't just complete the physical challenges, they reimagined them. When faced with a strength test designed for giants, they used leverage and simple machines to achieve the same results. During reflex trials, they demonstrated that their smaller size allowed for quicker reactions and more precise movements. But it was the problem-solving section that truly shocked the council. "This is impossible," muttered one examiner as Jack solved a quantum puzzle in seconds. "He's not even using the standard solution method." "Because he found a shortcut," Ray explained from his observation post. "Look, instead of following the expected path, he's identified a pattern we never noticed. He's solving it backward." The mental challenges continued, and with each test, the humans demonstrated not just intelligence, but a unique way of thinking. They approached problems from angles no other species had considered, found connections others had missed, and even improved upon some of the Council's own testing methods. "Now for the final test," Pete announced, activating a holographic display. "You must find a way to save this simulated colony from an approaching stellar explosion. No species has ever achieved more than a 60% survival rate." The three humans studied the simulation, whispering among themselves. Then Mary stepped forward with a surprising request. "Can we see the failed attempts of other species?" she asked. The examiners were taken aback. No one had ever asked to see others' failures before. "We learn best from mistakes, even if they're not our own," Bill explained with a smile. After reviewing the previous attempts, the humans presented their solution. Instead of trying to evacuate the colony or shield it from the explosion, they proposed using the stellar explosion itself as an energy source to power a massive jump drive. "You want to move the entire planet?" Pete asked, incredulous. "Why not?" Jack replied. "The explosion provides all the energy we need. We just have to harness it correctly." The simulation ran, and the examiners watched in stunned silence as the survival rate climbed past 60%, past 80%, finally settling at 95%. "They didn't just solve it," Ray observed quietly. "They turned the problem itself into the solution." As the trials concluded, the examining panel found themselves facing an unprecedented situation. The humans hadn't just passed the tests. They'd fundamentally changed how the Council would approach testing itself. "Well," Pete said, looking at his fellow examiners, "I believe we have some things to learn from our small friends here." The humans smiled, already pulling out notepads where they'd jotted down suggestions for improving other Council systems they'd noticed during their short stay. The Council's emergency alarm echoed through the massive central chamber, its harsh sound reflecting the gravity of the situation. On the main display, a terrifying sight made even the largest and strongest species tremble. A massive space anomaly was tearing holes in the fabric of spacetime, threatening to destroy entire star systems. "The void storm is expanding faster than predicted," announced Head Counselor Dan, his voice tight with concern. 3 solar systems have already been lost." The gathered representatives from the largest and most technologically advanced species argued among themselves, each proposing solutions based on their strengths. The giant rock dwellers suggested building massive shield arrays. The energy beings wanted to try containing it with force fields. In the corner of the chamber, the 3 human representatives, Bill, Jack, and Mary, studied the data streams with intense concentration, occasionally whispering to each other. "Our biggest ships can't get close enough," one of the Council's military leaders reported. "The gravitational forces tear them apart." "Then maybe we need to think smaller," Bill spoke up, his voice carrying across the chamber despite his small stature. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the tiny humans. "We've been studying the anomaly's pattern," Mary explained, stepping forward. "The problem isn't just its size, it's its complexity. But that's also its weakness." Using the central holographic display, Jack pulled up a detailed analysis they'd somehow compiled in the last few hours. "Look here," he pointed to a series of energy fluctuations. "The anomaly isn't one big thing. It's millions of tiny tiers in spacetime, working together like a swarm. And you can't fight a swarm with a sledgehammer," Bill added, "You need precision. You need to be small enough to get between the tiers." The council members looked skeptical. One of the energy beings spoke up. "Our smallest ships are still too large. Nothing could survive in there." Mary smiled. "Nothing your size, maybe, but we've designed something that could work." She transmitted the plans to the main display, showing a fleet of tiny ships, each barely larger than a human escape pod. "These microships can navigate between the space-time tiers," she explained. "They're small enough to avoid the worst of the gravitational forces, and we can pilot them remotely using a neural interface we developed by studying your technology." "This is madness," someone shouted from the crowd. "Those ships would be torn apart." "Not if we use the anomaly's own energy against it," Jack countered. "Like riding a wave instead of trying to stop it. We've calculated every possible angle of approach." The council chamber erupted in heated discussion. The plan seemed impossible, suicidal even. But as the data continued to stream and showing more systems at risk, they realized they were running out of options. "How did you even come up with this?" Ray asked the humans quietly. "We studied how our planet's smallest creatures deal with storms," Bill explained. "Ants can survive floods by forming living rafts. Beetles can withstand forces thousands of times their body weight. Sometimes the smallest solution is the best one." Head Counselor Dan raised his hand for silence. "The void storm will reach the core worlds in less than 10 cycles. We've tried everything else." He turned to the humans. "How quickly can you implement your plan?" "We've already started," Mary replied, showing another display where several microships were being assembled using modified council technology. "Being small means we can work fast, and right now time is the one thing we don't have." As the council watched the humans spring into action, coordinating with various species to build their fleet of tiny ships, one thing became clear. Sometimes the biggest problems needed the smallest solutions. The launch bay of the council's main station buzzed with frantic activity as the fleet of microships prepared for deployment. Each vessel, no larger than an Earth car, gleamed under the bay lights. Their small size, once seen as a weakness, now represented the galaxy's best hope for survival. "Final systems check complete," Mary announced from the control center. She sat surrounded by holographic displays, her fingers dancing across multiple control interfaces. "All 50 microships are ready for neural link." Bill and Jack stood at their own control stations, each responsible for guiding a portion of the fleet. Around them, the largest and most powerful species in the galaxy watched with a mixture of hope and doubt as these tiny humans prepared to face an enemy that had defeated their mightiest warships. "The void storm has reached the outer defense line," Ray reported from his monitoring station. "We're losing contact with the outer colonies." "Launch now," Head Counselor Dan ordered, his voice tight with urgency. The microships shot out of the launch bay in perfect formation. Their small size allowed them to accelerate faster than any conventional vessel, quickly reaching speeds that would have torn larger ships apart. "First wave approaching the storm boundary," Bill reported calmly. Through the neural interface, he could feel his group of ships as if they were extensions of his own body. "Beginning insertion maneuver." The council chamber watched in amazement as the tiny vessels darted between the tiers in spacetime. The void storm, a massive purple-black maelstrom of destructive energy, seemed to dwarf the human ships even more than it had the council's largest vessels. "We're detecting massive gravitational fluctuations," one of the council's scientists warned. "No ship has survived these conditions before." But the microships didn't try to fight the gravitational forces. Instead, they used them, letting the storm's own energy carry them deeper into its heart. Like leaves riding a whirlwind, they spun and weaved through gaps that larger ships couldn't even see. "Second wave, prepare for energy pulse deployment," Mary commanded. Her ships moved into position, each carrying a specially designed energy inverter that the humans had created by modifying council technology. Suddenly, one of the ships was caught in a particularly violent surge, lost contact with Micro 17. Jack reported, his voice steady despite the setback. Adjusting formation to compensate. The remaining ships tightened their formation, continuing their dance through the chaos. They reached positions that the Council's sensors could barely track, deep within the heart of the storm. All ships in position, Bill announced. Starting the pulse sequence. The microships began emitting carefully calibrated energy pulses, each one precisely timed to match the storm's own rhythms. Like acupuncture needles targeting pressure points, they struck at the weakest points in the storm's structure. Energy readings are fluctuating, Ray reported excitedly. The storm's cohesion is breaking down. The void storm's purple-black mass began to shimmer and break apart. The tiny ships continued their work, each pulse causing more disruption to the storm's structure. Where brute force had failed, precision and timing were succeeding. Final pulse sequence in 3, 2, 1. Mary's voice rang out across the command center. Execute. A brilliant flash of light filled the main display. When it faded, the void storm was collapsing in on itself, its energy dispersing harmlessly into space. Storm containment successful, Bill reported, his voice showing the first signs of fatigue. All surviving ships returning to base. The council chamber erupted in cheers. Species that had looked down on humans for their size were now celebrating their victory. The smallest ships in the galaxy had just accomplished what the largest and most powerful vessels couldn't. As the microships returned to the station, Head Counselor Dan turned to Ray. "It seems we need to reconsider our definition of powerful," he said thoughtfully. "Size isn't everything." Ray agreed, watching the tiny vessels dock. Sometimes the smallest key can open the largest door. 1 year after the Void Storm crisis, the Galactic Council's Great Chamber looked very different. The massive seats designed for the largest species now had special platforms installed at various heights, allowing representatives of all sizes to participate equally in discussions. At one of these platforms, Bill sat as Earth's first official council representative. "The annual species assessment criteria review is now in session," announced Head Counselor Dan, looking around the chamber with a smile. The past year had brought more changes to the council than the previous 1,000. "Our first order of business," he continued, "is the official adoption of the new evaluation system, which no longer uses physical size as a primary factor in species ranking." The chamber, once dominated by the voices of the largest species, now buzzed with discussion from beings of all sizes. The human success had led to the discovery of other small but highly capable species who had previously been overlooked. "The human approach to the Void Storm crisis has taught us a valuable lesson." Ray spoke from his position as Chief of Research. "Their success came not from raw power or advanced technology, but from their ability to see solutions others couldn't imagine." On the main display, footage showed the various ways humanity's influence had spread through the galaxy. Their microship design had revolutionized space exploration, allowing ships to investigate phenomena that larger vessels could never approach. Their problem-solving methods were being taught in schools across the galaxy. "We've also seen unprecedented cooperation between species," Mary added from her position as head of the new Interspecies Innovation Division. She pulled up data showing how combining the different strengths of various species had led to remarkable advances. "Small species are perfect for detailed work and exploring tight spaces," she explained. "Medium-sized species excel at coordination and adaptation. Large species provide the raw power needed for major construction. Working together, we're stronger than we ever were separately." Jack, now leading the Council's crisis response team, brought up another display showing the new emergency response protocols. "We've learned to look at every crisis from multiple perspectives," he said. "Sometimes the biggest problems need the smallest solutions, and sometimes the opposite is true." The chamber's attention turned to a new project being displayed. The first joint species space station designed to accommodate beings of all sizes. Its architecture incorporated ideas from every member species, creating spaces where all could work together comfortably. "But perhaps our most important achievement," Head Counselor Dan noted, has been the change in how we view ourselves and each other. The display shifted to show scenes from across the galaxy. Tiny maintenance crews working alongside giant construction teams, small species piloting specialized vessels between massive cargo ships, beings of all sizes contributing their unique abilities to shared projects. A year ago, we thought power came from size, Dan continued. We were wrong. True power comes from understanding, adaptation, and cooperation. Bill stood up on his platform, his small stature no longer drawing surprised looks from other representatives. When we first contacted the council, we didn't know what to expect, he said. We just knew we had something to contribute. Every species does, if given the chance. The chamber erupted in appreciative sounds from various species. The old hierarchy based on size had been replaced by a new understanding of each species' unique value. The galaxy is a big place, Ray concluded, but it's the small things that often make the biggest difference. As the session continued, discussions turned to future projects and possibilities. The gathered representatives, from the smallest to the largest, now worked together as equals, each contributing their unique perspectives and abilities. The humans had not only found their place in the galaxy, they had helped create a new way for all species to work together. In doing so, they had proven that being small didn't mean being weak. Sometimes, it meant being exactly what the galaxy needed.